I'm Javier Klopper from the Research Office at Vinci, and you all saw the invite, and this afternoon is about two very interesting topics, and I think we all anticipate an interactive discussion and looking forward to that. Before we get into the icebreaker for the day, just a reminder, the topic of the student that Portia Heynes, she's currently busy with a doctorate, is there to share experience, give us some insight into a methodology, and also some of the challenges and decisions she had to make in a study. And, hopefully you have some questions for her, you can give her, and it's there to, in the network also to assist her with the final execution of a study and give her the necessary podium. And then we have the guest speaker, Dr. Premi Naika, that will talk to us about a relation to the topic of the first speaker, but more in line to what she's currently busy with and her insight and experience in the industry and sector. And, it's an open and free discussion, and I really think two interesting topics. So to kick off, I read this article this morning, and when I saw that, I realized it aligned to what's happening in the session this afternoon, and that's about working remotely. And the question of the article were, are we moving into recycling offices? And how do we need to think about working remotely, and how do we need to argue what are the new trends? Previously, taboo words were co-working. We were very sensitive for things about flexi hours. Employers were hesitant to go there. Working remotely was not allowed. You need to come to the office every day, switch on the light, switch it off, that the people see you are working. They didn't trust each other. And I saw, Monica, you have some experience of you enjoying words such as virtual were not there, hybrid office hours, repurposing the work at work, solo working, open spaces, hybrid spaces, so all new words. And I saw an article 2 weeks ago, they talk about the Zoom boom, the new teams. Normally we had people in the teams, now we've got MS teams. And I think that's the reality. Where I'm sitting, coronavirus in many ways accelerated. How do we think about that? The Financial Times, and this is another article I read, had a special report about future cities. And they say, moving into the future, people will shop online, and we can already see that this morning. And I'm at home at the moment. We had 2 people dropping off from Take a Lot, one to us and one to the next door neighbor. And there's less socializing. Socializing happened in a different space. So my question to the floor, anybody that have a very clear view on where this remote working is going? We understand maybe the new cities will look different. 50 minutes away from your home, you have your store where you buy your groceries. You have your coffee shop that you go. You will buy your bread, so you don't really move out. You will work from home. That's one position, but I think there's also other things changing. How do we think about the space at office? Will we say to each other, we won't use office space anymore? Or will we take a more proactive space and yes, we will have office space, maybe not as much, far less, but we need to use that space more creatively. So you will have solo space, you will have space for collaboration. I can repurpose my space. Any specific views from the floor, or questions or things that you challenged with or struggled at work related here to, please join the discussion. Everybody working at office or everybody working from home in a hybrid space?
Working from home.
Andrew, your view to that. Are you threatened by this remote working? Do you think we're more productive? Do you think companies should reduce office space? Would you prefer to work from home permanently after?
Yes, if you have got a choice. Other companies have already said you work from home, so it's not like you have to prefer. But I think it's the new way of working post-COVID. Technologically, something which we expected to happen so many years in the future. But now the world is accelerated, and working from home is the new normal.
The new normal. How does that new normal look? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think we will be working harder? Is there a challenge around being human? If you look at the discussion on the 5th Industrial Revolution, we're saying to us that interaction between human beings are crucial. how will we nurture that? How will we make sure that the two of us have a record if we haven't met offline, but we can work very productively online?
I think we are moving towards robots slowly, but I think there will be some human interaction. But with time, it's about your assignment, your task. It's not like you are supposed to work for 8 to 5, no, but you are supposed to do certain tasks. If you do it in 2 hours, that's your own plan. You reschedule your life. And as long as things are moving, I think that's really where we are going into. It's no longer the work which we used to think as work at a certain location, but rather in terms of tasks and assignments and meeting objectives.
Pros and cons, the whole remote working, and it's about finding a balance. So, yes, office space is being decreased because people are working more from home, but we also crave that human interaction. And so what's nice is that if you're feeling alone, because it's a very lonely space to work on your own, because as human beings, we need that human interaction. We need to speak to someone, we need to see, we need to touch, we need to feel. And I really believe that having a blended approach to this remote working would be an ideal scenario, where if I want to go into the office, I should be able to do that, obviously taking precautions, especially now with the pandemic. But even after, post-pandemic, what do we do? Because we're all getting used to this remote working. So it's finding a balance of actually working in an office with people and then finding the balance to work from home. And interestingly enough, I just had a conversation with a lady at reception, and she says, I can't wait to get back to the office, because as a woman, I have to look after the kids, I have to do the cooking, I have to do the cleaning, I have to work, and all of this in like 8 or 9 hours a day. It's you have to be superwoman or superhuman to be able to do all of that stuff. So there's pros and cons, and she can't wait to get back to the office. Then she doesn't have to do all of the other stuff as well. So I think it's just, and I don't know if the men feel that way as well, but it's easier, I think, as a man, where you can lock the door at home and work in your office environment like you're at work. And then what happens is that the mom or the wife has to do all of the household chores, including doing her day job. So it does make it quite challenging, and one needs to find that balance. And also then the whole thing comes into play where we start sharing responsibilities. So I don't know how everyone else feels about that.
No, that's definitely some merit. Maybe other people that we respond. This morning we had a meeting at work online, and some people were at office about the online teaching delivery model using Moodle and some of the refinements we're making. And I think, a lot of the things come to say, how can we manage some challenges? I had a discussion with a colleague in Australia the other day. They said to each other, it's fine if your dog barks in the background. It's fine if the doorbell rings while you're working, because we understand you're working remotely. So I think there's some new rules that one also need to think about and get comfort in a new position to that. Maybe more views?
If I may come in, I do agree that we do need to balance our lives. I've actually worked basically from home for the past 9 years. And you had a balance, and I felt like since lockdown, it's actually almost been no balance, because people have no respect for other people's space. So you have to be on meetings from 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. You have to work weekends. You have to be on Sunday nights because there's something urgent that we suddenly have to do. I work in the sports industry, and I do coach development, and I've done quite a lot of online courses, and I've done some of my Da Vinci modules online, where we had to still submit our assignments, etc. And I felt that the lack of that face-to-face contact was actually something that really had an impact. The past weekend, I went to the Free State and I did some coach development there. And even though we observed all the protocols, I think it was also for those people to just interact with each other and realize that there's a different life out there than just sitting on a computer or on a cell phone on a Zoom meeting. You can send people videos, you can tell them what to do, but doing the practicals where you're actually busy coaching really has an impact on people in the sports fraternity. So for me, it's I think that lockdown has taken away almost our privacy. And yeah, having that contact with people for the few months that we weren't allowed to do these courses, it was a different ball game. But you can also see that people are hungry for that face-to-face interaction.
I think, no, thank you for sharing that. The lessons learned are very useful, and I think the challenges pointed out. And I think, even speaking of myself, I think a lot of those are a real reality. I remember my position in the early days where don't sit in your office next to me and send me email. Let's rather talk to each other. Now I experience people sit next to each other in the office and then they do Zoom calls without engaging with each other. So I think in a way, the horses for courses principle applies. Some things you can do offline, some you can do online, and it depends on your reality, your challenges, the market, the people you engage with. And we must not be naive. Somewhere we'll need to define this hybrid working space. And, and I think the big challenge I have, and before I allow another question or two, is, or the observation is, a lot of the time the discussion are reflected internally and say, how do we as employees need to think about that? And that's also what I've done so far. We should actually ask, how do our consumers or our clients perceive this? And I think that's what you said to us, Annelien. We must rather think about who we touch and our engagements than our own preferences. But we also are human, and we have the right for privacy, and we have our own requirements and house rules. Anybody else that would love to chip in here?
Yes, I just would like to add, my name is Marlene and I'm from the University of Johannesburg, working with the social work and community development departments. So one of the definite benefits of the whole lockdown is for people with disabilities to have much more flexibility in how they work and from where they work. Because we as able-bodied people do not realize the ableist societies and systems that we have set up and how challenging and difficult it is for people with disabilities, whether it's physical or non-visible or mental or other health-related disabilities. So in that way, people with disabilities can schedule their work environment much better from home, much more flexible, and it's just more considerate and compassionate, because we as able-bodied people need to start question how we set up our work environments and whether it is accessible for people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. And I think that's a very valuable lens that you bring to the table. We must not assume. And I reflect back to the discussion I had with the people of the National Institute of Deaf People last week. And you pretty much touched on some of those. So, and I think what we've now said, there's quite a lot of questions we ask, and I think thank you for the input. At least we've managed just to talk other people as well, and I would love then to invite now to the floor Ms. Portia Heynes, and her topic slots in with what we have. And let me just open that. So Portia is currently a doctorate student of us. And it's a continuation of this, and Portia will also give us some reflections on this. The topic, as you saw in the invite, is addressing the mismatch between employability and relevance of skills towards a systemic employability design. Now, Portia is a systems thinking person, and I saw, Janet, that when we used the word system and systemic thinking, you nodded on that. So she's definitely a systems thinking person. With a multi-potentialite, and she will explain that term to us a bit later, taking it into home amongst the daughters, and that's what she mentioned to me the other day. With many interests and creative pursuits, designing suitable learning strategies and cultures by unlocking potential in individuals. She holds a BCom, an executive MBA at UCT, which surface the social economic challenges of employability, and that's where passion comes from. And she's really passionate about that. Pick it up. Proposing a systemic learning framework, and we're going to learn more about where she's with the studies this afternoon, and what does she challenged with, and the decision she had to make. She also attended the INSEAD Business School, which changed the perspective and direction of her studies. And I know two colleagues there, and I think it's a very interesting business school where they only allow X percentage from various parts of the world, a truly international business school. She has more than 25 years experience in various industries across multiple disciplines, from entrepreneurship, telecommunications, hospitality and gaming, financial services, education, business processing, outsourcing, even agriculture, property management, e-commerce, payments and consulting. And combined with her personal challenges with education post the 1985 struggle, and she will also touch on that in the discussion, hopefully share with us her insight and lessons learned, and being exposed both locally and globally, she gained valuable insights into the dynamic interrelationship between employees and the organization. And I think I had some engagement with Porsha before last week, and it's really interesting where this topic of hers is going, and it's under supervision of Prof. Krishna Govardhan. So we're really looking forward to that. But what triggered this was actually the mismatch between the various views of employability and relevant skills that prompted Portia's interest in pursuing furthering her studies with the Da Vinci Institute, and she views her legacy and contribution to society at large. She currently is the CEO of Upliftment Inspired Consulting, and also lectures in the fields of systems thinking, digital transformation, change and talent management for digital businesses, personal mastery, and diversity and inclusion. Good afternoon, welcome, Portia. So I would love maybe to open the discussion and say to you, and please, colleagues, if the people in the room have questions, chip in. Can you summarize your study for us in 5 sentences, over and above introduction? What it's about, what can you teach us, what can we learn from you? Because it's all in there. We can have a shortcut by that, listening to you.
Okay, thanks, HB. So just to provide some context, over the past decade, the concept of employability has really been the focus of considerable media attention internationally as well as locally. And then we have unemployment, which is a global phenomenon. So it's not just a local problem in South Africa. And in fact, it is a major concern in that it is on an upward trajectory. This given the fourth industrial revolution, the disruption, and in particular, the demand on skills. And all of this, basically where my research started, was prior to COVID. So the COVID-19 pandemic has really expedited whatever was happening into the now, which is our new normal. So, added to that, I think there's from lecturing and talking to working individuals, there is really a fear about the fourth industrial revolution, 4IR, 5IR, in some way creating somewhat a freeze with individuals, and not necessarily seeing the opportunity, which is where my major concern lies. In terms of jobs, so in an article I read, 75 million old jobs will go away, and this was by 2022. And 135 million new jobs will be created because of new technologies. Okay, so the challenge really, as in why I started this research, is the global decolonization of education started with the fees must fall and all of that. There was a call for education to address unemployment. Certain funding was freed up. And all of this, given the fourth industrial revolution, I thought, what is then the mismatch? And this based on the context of me working in corporate, my own ontology, as well as seeing graduates coming straight from university into the work environment, and seeing this mismatch. And I'll talk later probably about, the different views of employability. So, on top of that, it's also about the relevance of skills. And there is a lot around that, especially given, again, fourth industrial revolution. So, the topic that I selected really makes this imperative for governments, policymakers, and educational institutions to start to understand what needs to be done to rectify the situation. And in some way, I feel, we're doing pretty much the same as we've done in terms of we're not really approaching this in any different way. So added to that, over 1 in 4 adults surveyed, and this was from the OECD report, reported a mismatch between their current skills and their qualifications required for jobs. So, if we look at it, despite this increase, and despite the increase in enrollment of students, and these are in Africa, African students, from 68% in 2011 to 74%. And I somewhat think funding has a role to play in that. And this was this was published in 2017 by CHE. This was their 2019 report. And just prior to this, I also looked at a prior report which said only 30%, this was for the period basically up to 2016 from about 2011, only 30% of the first time entering cohorts admitted to South African higher education institutions in 2000 had graduated by 2004, which is quite significant. Yeah. Of that, 56% leaving the original institutions at which they had enrolled without graduating, and 14% still in the system 7 years later. So I found similar alarming figures to this. And for the period up to between 2011 and 2016, what I saw on the studies was that only on average between 17 and 20% of the number of students enrolled actually graduated, which then reflects that 74 to 78% of students were not successful in certain courses. And this was tabled in a report. Yet this report does not contain any empirical data or qualitative data to substantiate the reason for why this disparate gap between 22 and 26% were not successful. And I think looking at my daughter, she failed a subject repeatedly. And I suspect this is why. So there's just some subjects that I think graduates are not grasping. And because of 1 or 2 subjects, they may not make it. And then I think also there's the socioeconomic challenges. So, nor does these reports contain any narrative on actions and a plan on how we're going to mitigate these lower number of graduates. So against this background, initially in 2014, I was set on looking to address the challenge of education and its impact on employment and employability. And my then supervisor said, "Am I mad? Employment and employability are 2 huge constructs." I went away spiraling in a washing machine, and then I thought, let me go and explore and research this further. So it was in the proposal phase of my journey that I realized that these 3 constructs, so education, employment, and employability, were in fact too broad. So metacognitively, like many other researchers, my view on employability was perhaps, in hindsight, a bit too simplistic. So after further research, employability then surfaced as the genus to employment as well as education. And then I reframed the study basically to address the mismatch between current views of employability and relevance of skills. And this mismatch, given the varied views of employability by stakeholders, and to gain insight into how these views relate to or impact the relevance of skills. So I'm really looking to develop a conceptual framework toward a systemic employability design, which I previously stated as a educational design, which is now employability design, that could address the mismatch, So in essence, lastly on this point, HB, it is really to explore an outside-in approach to employability, one that could potentially elicit conversations with divergent thinkers around designing for successful employability, systemically so. So it's bringing those individuals that are vested in the problem to try and solve the problem, but from an outside-in perspective.
Thank you, Portia. So I think you've, in the last bit, because as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, what are the golden line or the thread that keeps your thesis together, but that you've explained to us. Would you say, by looking at that, I would assume there's quite a lot of literature, you quote a lot of statistics that you well read, and that I appreciate. But what is the main issues and debates in the subject area? Maybe 2 or 3, if you can highlight that to us, that you're picking up, that we must pay attention to. And the moment I'm reading a book by Daniel Susskind, a PhD in economics from Oxford, and he talks about the world without work. It's not available in the country. You can buy it on Amazon. A very interesting read. And they talk about trends and histories. And, also quote some numbers and how populations will move from one. But he makes the question, maybe we will run into a space where we will not be enough work for people. So what is the debate that you're picking up in your reading around your topic?
Okay, so what I'm picking up is, firstly, that we are taking a very simplistic view of employability. And in fact, it's more complex than we think, and it's multifaceted. Hence me using a systems thinking approach to the study. I think one of the areas that I'm picking up is the mismatch. So, if I look at the varied views, so let me just mention a few stakeholders. So if you talk to government, and I'm generalizing here based on what I've picked up, if you speak to government views employability, if you look at media and the reports, views it as job creation. This is then measured as either unemployment rates or throughput in terms of jobs. Then you've got industry or business. So industry and business views employability as individuals who can and are ready to do the job. So either expect these individuals to have the right skills, the values, the attitudes or behaviors. And then you have higher education, who views employability as providing the right knowledge, skills, and attributes to secure a job. And then finally, you have the students as individuals or graduates who view employability as being employed or having a job. And I think the one challenge I must just add to this is we're not managing the graduate expectations very well at this point. We are saying to them, or what I hear them say or expect, is that I have free education, I'm now going to study, and therefore I expect to get a good job, which I think we're going to start seeing a massive problem since we started opening that gate. I suspect in another 3 or so years, we're going to start seeing the ramification of that when those promises or expectations are not met. Okay. And then I think maybe one other one that I'd mention is, demystifying some assumptions. So size and structure of the labor market does not imply an increase in employability. And I think this is one of the fallacies. Just having jobs does not mean individuals are going to fall into those jobs. And then using employment outcomes then also as a measure of graduates' employability is also not effective as it is retrospective. I mean, the one report I mentioned, it's retrospective in 2017. The report went back to 2011, 2016. We're now looking at 2019. So it's retrospective, statistical with limited, as I mentioned, empirical and qualitative data. So it is important that we understand the root causes of what is creating, firstly, graduates not being able to be employed or sort of unemployable, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No. Thank you for that, Portia.
Yeah.
Because you basically talk to the narrow definition, and I also understand the extended definition.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you touched on the fact that, if you're graduated, it doesn't guarantee employment.
No.
Can I maybe return to the floor and ask any people with a strong view that have read the OECD report that have an opinion about this matter? Because surely our employability is increasing, the unemployability, and in a large extent, the question is, what do we do to allow the graduates immediate traction? So almost, what they learn today, they must use tomorrow. And what they learn or they use at work, they must learn about and read about. Any views from the floor that would like to comment on that OECD report?
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Mónica Barnes. I come from Barcelona, Spain. And Dr. Naiker had the pleasure to be invited here by her. And I have a question to you, Portia, because you were talking about the mismatch, right?
Yes.
And the graduates and this unemployment. And my question for you is, how do you think learnability could help both parts, the ones who have the jobs and the ones who have some knowledge that maybe are not exactly how the jobs are, but maybe they would be passionate about considering the jobs? How do you think learnability could help both parts in order to dilute this mismatch?
A very good question. Anybody that would love to respond to that? A question of Monica?
So if I understand the question correctly, Monica, the learnability, what I found is there's something called learning intention. So learners need to, so in fact, the research talks about, in fact, making students vest in paying for the studies, making them vest in, if they're able. But learnability is about learning intention, where they learn as a matter of fact all the time, and they are vested. And in fact, on the other end, in terms of business, what they're also saying is we need to engage with the graduates much earlier on the topic of employability. So we're doing this far too late. So their motivation, their drivers, and so forth is not necessarily in place. So the why is quite important. And in fact, I did a different type of design in terms of learning. It's called Format, which is based, which I didn't know, which is based on Chris Agris's work, which is systems thinker, which is almost learning backward integrating. So in that model, we teach in terms of concept, context, why, meaning first. And then, believe it or not, out of the slice of the pie, only 1/8 of that is content. So the learners need to engage in their own learning, but we need to create the interest, which is fundamentally different to the way we're teaching right now.
I think that's a valid point, and I would fully agree. So, and people that know me well, I argue we should move away from definitely pedagogy and even away from androgogy. Yeah. And rather look at heterogogy and the way we self-determined our learning. And hence, I'm a forestander of micro-credentials and little building blocks. And I really challenge, the future. And I think the regulatory environment cannot handle that, because at the end, it's our responsibility to teach the right thing. And, it's a four-way street between the education institution, the government, what needs to be done in society, and even the student. And that then is based on a much more broader principle aligned to the National Development Plan in South Africa, or the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think, Portia, the topic you shared with us, and I'm keeping an eye on the time, is definitely worth tackling. And it's very interesting. You kind of, we touched on the major developments in this area. But if you turn the clock forward, you take us 5 years from now, where will we sit? What do you foresee? What's your anticipation of where we're going?
I think, HB, if we don't wake up as organizations, and as Monica said, as individuals, unfortunately, it is going to be catastrophic.
Yeah.
Because, predictions were prior to COVID, was that 40% of the jobs would not exist or be impacted by 2030. Well, 2030 has just moved to now. So, at that point, I predicted a 50 to 70% unemployment rate based on the then 29% unemployment, plus looking at the 40%, assuming that no one wakes up. So why I say 50% is if 20% wakes up, we at least have a chance. And I think this is fundamentally my concern, is almost to create this awareness of what's happening, and move the needle, because I feel that a lot of graduates, I think, as Monica said, is a lot of graduates are not researching on their own. And when I say graduates, I'm even talking people that are employed. They are not research. They are not reading up on these topics. So I think taking us 5 years from now, I think we need to change our narrative as well. from a narrative one. And then we also need to change our narrative also in terms of what jobs will look like in the future. So there is definitely a shift from repetitive tasks to non-repetitive tasks. So, from problem solving, which was quite interesting. I found an article that said, all the 5 key elements that we say are critical to the future, one of them were problem solving. Yet if you think about it, AI and machines will solve problems. In fact, as humans, we need to actually problem find, which
problem probing,
problem find, because inherently we actually need. What does that say? That says, if I must find a problem, I need to know everything around that problem. And then there is this transition to what they call hybrid jobs. Now, hybrid jobs requires many skills and roles to get the job done. So, one of the articles said that hybrid jobs only have a 12% likelihood of automation compared to 42% for jobs overall. So you stand a better chance if you broaden your skill set. Then there is this other thing that we need to overcome, which is this about skills versus capability. And how I define that is, if I have a skill, and it's saying to have I must be careful how I say this, to have a hen, no, I'm going to get my things confused. To have a hen that lays eggs is far better than having eggs. So that's how I differentiate between skills and capability. So the capability is you need to almost understand something from a meta level, and so that you can apply it in various concepts. So I think this is where it is going. And I think the other area is we spoke about education systems. So there's a nice term called, we almost need to build skills, which means one learns, unlearns, relearns continuously. So it's almost what we call an anti-disciplinary approach to education. So we need to undo the discipline. And then I think the last thing that I would actually add there is also around how we adopting technology. So at this point, our focus is a lot more on STEM type areas. And what we need to guard against is that that's not the only thing that is going to move us forward. We need to start developing the softer skills as well. So this, the notion of fast tracking just STEM technology, it's actually the softer skills that, will harness this. So, we need people who can find problems and then also apply the technology to solve those problems across business. And for that to happen, my sense is that we will need to move from having only deep programming skills and nurturing only STEM talent to bringing to the fore the mix of skills from like liberal arts, design, humanities, and other backgrounds that are completely removed from the world of STEM. Because if you think about the makeup of a typical generalizing technology type person, they are more logical. So you need to combine that areas. So in this construct, the technology is important, but the bigger virtue is the ability to apply it in a human and empathetic way to solve the business problem. And I think that is the future.
Yeah, I can live with that, Portia, because I think that focus on the human being, is exactly what we say in the fifth industrial revolution. I saw Hercules. I'm not sure if I missed that, but you had your hand in the air. Did you want to contribute to the discussion? And then I saw Janet also. Maybe Hercules first.
Yes, and I'm sorry, maybe I tried a number of times before. Portia, I'm not sure, I don't want to take you back, but in your definition, I'm not sure if you looked at it, what I would call a definition of employability from an entrepreneurial view, in a sense that there should not be an employer. Everybody that gets into the market is the employer based on their skill set, and you only deliver on what is required. And as a result, kind of changes the narrative around employment and unemployment. In a sense that the jobs of the future doesn't necessarily require an employer, but it requires a skill set that can be sold on demand. And I'm not sure if the framework has considered that.
Yeah. So Hercules, in the beginning, I had entrepreneurship as well in there. I think my view, based on what I've seen and read up on, I have a view that whether you're working in corporate or not, you need to be an entrepreneur, given where things are going. And I am writing a book on UPTY Ltd. So I say I'm Portia Heynes, PTY Ltd. So what decisions would I make that an entity would make for where I stand as an individual? And I would make the same decisions as a corporate would. So I think entrepreneurship fits into the model. It's not mentioned as strong in the model because I had to focus the study. However, it implies that whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an individual, the same or similar type of traits and attributes will be required, similar type of thinking, because you'll have to apply to the business concept in any event.
Yeah. Thank you. And
I hope that makes sense, Hercules.
Janet? Yeah, I think that's a good point, because we need to ask that question, and we should always keep on asking that. Janet, you had a question.
Just a couple of comments, actually. Thank you, HB. So I just, maybe from my own frame of reference, I'm busy doing two things at the moment. A master's looking at stakeholder engagement in wicked problems, and then also from a business perspective, developing 21st century leader skills program. And I think some of the things that I've come across that I think are really challenging is, firstly, and it kind of relates to what Hercules was saying just now, business models are changing. Patterns of economics are changing. Everything is changing. And what that means is that business itself doesn't even know what it needs, actually. It's speculating. So is academia. Academia is speculating. We're guessing, we're trying. I met the other day with the head of a very large training company. I don't consider myself to be a genius in all of these things, but I promise you, he wasn't even following my language in terms of, and this is a company delivering training across, large portions of South Africa. So I think that the potential shifts also in terms of business are massive. I'm busy dealing at the moment with a company it's a high-tech company, and I've just looked at a business plan of theirs. The expansion of their business into whole new areas is going to be phenomenal in the next 5 years. And so all of these things are combining to go, well, the trouble is, in part, we don't really know. There are people putting out lists saying these are the 5 most important skills and these are the 8 most important skills. I've counted at least 50 of those most important skills, and they are not simple skills. They're profound skills. And the question is, do our academics even understand the skills themselves, and are they going to be able to transfer them? So for me, it's a very exciting space. And Portia, I wish you all the best.
Thank you. So I think added to Janet, if I may, HB.
Yes, please.
I think, Janet, this is why I am flipping the approach to an outside-in approach, because the key questions, one of the questions in there is, or one of the questions I thought about is, when we talk as institutions or government and we say there are 200,000 jobs, we are not able to say exactly where are those jobs, because if we know where are those jobs, that's a good starting point. Yeah. So in terms of number of jobs, we need to define them. And the outside-in approach is going to firstly ask the question, hopefully, this is just the thinking right now, is to say, in your industry, where are the jobs? What jobs what will the jobs look like in the future? And where are your people now? And then this whole thing about reskill, upskill, and so forth, and outskilling. So in terms of that, we're saying, where are the jobs in your industry? And hopefully this conceptual framework will get people together to say, we know what the jobs are going to be needed as, we know the number, we know where people are, and then hopefully we can get education in the room, we can get and that's why I use the word divergent thinkers. I'm not looking for people that are going to bring in old thinking, because that's not going to help the cause. But using systems thinking tools and frameworks, helps takes the egos, the politics, or the political agendas away, and it deals with the problem, which is why I'm using systems thinking. So I think that is really the thinking of the conceptual framework, is the outside in, going where there's opportunities and designing to the front.
So this is a question I had earlier on for Portia, and then maybe the rest of the people on the platform, around the issues when we discussed about the working from home. That, don't we think the discussion we have is just a precursor of something that is coming where we don't have a choice? From a systems approach, that only certain ways of doing work, only work platforms are recognized, that really individuals have no choice. But for instance, you can only have 10% of people not working from home. And I'm not sure from a system plot, what we're seeing now with the business models and the platform that we have accelerated to, is it not a foregone conclusion that we do not have a choice? The way of doing things is predetermined by technology deployed.
Yes.
For the future.
Hercules, if I may, I read an article, and I try and, they say 70% of statistics are made up on the spot, but this article argued that the global research by, I think it was a Times University study, said that prior COVID, the 2 out of the people that worked from home, post-COVID, the indication are, by interviewing them, that they will probably double up to about 2.4% of the time working from home. So I think we'll probably see 2 things. We'll see that the people that used to work hybrid from home will probably increase. But I also suspect, like a pendulum swings, a lot of people will go back and go back to the office. And I think hence we need to ask these questions and keep on integrating this and don't be challenged not to deconstruct that, because we need to dissect this to have this. And I think that question, I don't have the answer, and maybe Portia, you have a view where this thing is going, but that's definitely something to keep our eye on.
Actually, I think my answer or response to that is it depends. It depends on the context. I think, I as on a personal level, I don't like to be led. I like to be ahead. That's just me. So I think, I've also seen systems very badly designed, Hercules. So I'd not want to put my faith in where the technology is leading, but to actually see what the patterns and the trends are. So, my answer or response is it depends on context, HB.
Yeah.
I think there will still be a balance between the two, but in terms of research and with the COVID articles and so forth, it's saying we're never going back to the old.
Portia, thank you for those views that you shared with us. We wish you best of luck with your research. You're not that far from a completion, and we will keep an eye on the findings.